On December 1st, 1966, in the cozy town of Gävle, northwest of Stockholm, a giant goat was erected. This goat was made of straw and stood at a colossal 13 meters tall. The goat stood proudly for a few weeks, drawing the eyes of many people. Until, well, something unexpected happened. A local man decided on his own initiative to go out and set the goat aflame. Earlier in the year, an advertising consultant had the idea of constructing this giant goat as a way to really draw people's eye. And so, with private funding and many hard weeks of work, this giant goat was constructed in the town square. Being made of straw, it was highly flammable. It erupted into a great pillar of fire and smoke. There was swiftly a manhunt by local police who apprehended the suspect. Next year, in 1967, the giant goat was rebuilt and placed back in the square. And in 1968, it stood there as well. Until in 1969, a man came up and burned it down again. One more year passed, and the goat was rebuilt in the center of town again. At which point, two drunk teenagers decided to set it ablaze for a third time. This time, the original builders had given up on the project entirely, seeing it as a lost cause, at which point responsibility was handed over to the school of Vasa. The goat was built once again before being promptly smashed to pieces. Undeterred, in 1972, the school of Vasa had built a smaller version, and in 1973, a man took this opportunity to take the entire goat. He brought it back to his property and placed it proudly in his backyard. The police soon found him. He was then sentenced to 2 years for aggravated theft. Now, you'd think these steep fines and harsh prison sentences would deter people and ward them off. But again, in 1974, the goat was burned again. In 1975, there was no one around to burn the goat. And so, the goat, of its own volition, decided to collapse under its own weight. In 1976, an entirely new method of goat removal was pioneered by an enterprising young student who got in his Volvo Amazon and came up and smashed his vehicle into the hind legs of the goat, collapsing the entire structure.
Brother. Brother. Brother, look at me. You know what is coming. You know the terrible weight of your burden, how it gnaws at your bones. The Yuletide approaches, my brother. A fate must be followed. The midwinter hungers for a sacrifice. A light must burn in the black night of the north. Both of us are mortal. Our matter will decay to dust. Lest you fail or succeed, one of us will be in the ground first. You or I, brother. Are thine loins girded for the terrible duty of man, or will you cower behind your heated abode?
As more straw goats lost their lives to the machinations of the locals, methods of goat defense were invented. At first, fences were built, but the locals simply jumped over the fences and ran over to try to ignite it before they could get caught. But sometimes it slowed them down enough for them to get tackled by security or local onlookers. From the start till the end of the 1980s, the goat only survived 2 Advent seasons. In 1993, the now 14.9 meter goat of the year made it into the Guinness Book of World Records. 2 years later, a Norwegian man would be caught red-handed with gasoline, attempting to burn down the goat. This Norwegian man was prevented from consummating the terrible deed of destruction. But yet, another man that year, unknown, managed to slip by and set the goat alight yet again. In 1997, a new tool was used, fireworks, shot off at the goat attempting to catch it alight with their blasts and explosions. This only damaged the goat, and the goat managed to survive that winter. By the year 2005, the goat had suffered several more terrible fates, but security was also being heightened, and so tactics decided to get decidedly more medieval. Witnesses to the scene of the crime described two men, one dressed up as Santa Claus and the other as the gingerbread man, wielding a bow and arrow with the tip wrapped in some sort of fabric and flammable material. The arrow was set alight, sent through the air, and stuck into the goat, which burst into flame. As years went on through the 2000s and 2010s, few goats came out unscathed. Police and even military sometimes patrolled the goat. Security cameras went up, which one year suffered a mysterious outage, and another year were hacked by DDoS. In recent years, however, a strange trend has happened. As we've moved into the 2020s, the goat has been surviving more years than it's burned. With new digital surveillance technology, DNA forensics, and more guards than ever, it's becoming more of a challenge to even reach the goat to destroy it, let alone get away without being caught. And with the steep punishments, it begs the question, why do people actually take the risk to burn it down in the first place? Why do people sacrifice their time, their money, their vehicles, their reputation, their court record to destroy a silly straw goat? It would seem that some Swedes believe that there is a level of sacrifice and bravery that is called for. They believe Boken must burn. Because if Boken doesn't burn, if Boken survives year after year, there is no more story. Boken just becomes any other local sideshow. But on the other hand, if Boken isn't defended, if no one is building or protecting the goat, then there's no challenge and there is no glory. Both halves are required for a compelling story.
But you must understand. I return eternally, as the energy of the Midgard-born always do until the great darkening of the skies. When the land withered, in forgotten times of our fathers, all knew that a sacrifice was required. One must die for the land to be reborn. Like a new offspring or a firebird from the ashes, life and death have been entangled.
Even when the Swedes fail to burn me, I collapse under my own accord.
Or I beckon the winged beasts of the air to peck away at my enweakened flesh. You Swedes should recall from Thomas Carlyle that it was the spirit of the Vikings and the Hansa, unlike the Hellenes with their domestic funerary urns, who heaped up great barrows as memorials of the lonely soul on the wide plains. It was the spirit of those who sent their dead kings to sea in their burning ships, thrilling manifests of their dark yearning for the boundless. The spirit of the Norsemen drove their cockleboats in the 10th century that heralded the Faustian birth to the coasts of America. The will to power, to use Nietzsche's great formula, that from the earliest Gothic of the Eddas, the cathedrals and crusades, and even from the old conquering Goths and Vikings, has distinguished the attitude of the northern soul to its world, appears also in a sense transcending energy.
In ancient Greek culture, there were thousands of deities, and among these there were 12 Olympians. And among these 12 Olympians, Friedrich Nietzsche believed that two were most important in defining and understanding the nature of Greek civilization. The first god is Apollo. When we think about Greek life, we often think about its orderliness, its laws, its rationality, its clear-headed philosophical thought. We think of its strict phalanxes, And to maintain and build such a complex and unmatched high civilization required an exceptional level of virtue and orderliness among the people. These civilized, constrained, orderly traits are those of the firm hand of Apollo. But there was another side to the ancient Greeks, where they would participate in wild, orgiastic rituals and ceremonies to the god Dionysus. Dionysus was the god of drunkenness, revelry, and destruction. Dionysus revels in the wild and unconstrained, when the inner nature of man becomes unbound by social convention and is let loose. In The Birth of Tragedy, Friedrich Nietzsche describes the Apollonian and the Dionysian impulses as being two dynamics by which Greek culture would shift from one to the other. Swedish life itself could be said to be highly Apollonian, prizing rule following, prizing sticking in your lane, following your duty, keeping society orderly. Yet, I think we know from enough Swedish history that Scandinavians have another side to them, namely one that looks a lot more like exploring and conquering the world, getting drunk on mead, and having enormous parties. It would seem that technology itself is at war with Dionysus, that technology that enables surveillance and forensics and defense is itself a sort of tool for Apollonian domination, the prevention of revelry, the prevention of burning and drunkenness and destruction. Technocratic rule demands the goat must survive, but the Dionysian, the more barbarian impulse, is not without virtue or strength either. And so the more defended the goat becomes, the harder it becomes for anyone to get by it, the more the necessity arises that sacrifices must be made. Within Gävle itself, we seem to have two different factions. We have the Apollonian citizens of Gävle who want to keep the Yule goat safe, they want to protect it, and we also have the Dionysian citizens of Gävle who seek to find ways to revel in its destruction and its fiery burning as it turns to ash. The war for Boken, the war for the goat, is in many ways just a microcosm of the tensions underneath the surface, the religious impulses, the natural impulses of man in Sweden today. And in many ways it's that balance, it is that tension that produces story, that produces culture. If it were pure Dionysian, there would be nothing to burn, there would be nothing to celebrate in, no revelry to be had, everything would just be ash. But with the Apollonian, there would be no change, there would be no story, there would be nothing to defend.
I will meet you again next Yuletide, in my next incarnation.
That worked!